Okay, let's get started. Again, my name is Bobby King. I'm the Minnesota Program Director for Solar United Neighbors. Thanks for being here to talk about our solar group buy and learn about the basics of solar. With me from Solar United Neighbors is John Anderson, who works here in Minnesota with me, who's going to be doing part of the presentation, and Trinity Dearborn, who lives in Iowa and does a lot of work here in Minnesota, especially around helping folks with the details of going solar, the equipment and understanding that. So I'm supposed to have control of the screen. There we go. All right. So some housekeeping here. Make sure you have your audio on, choose your mic and speakers for computer audio. You can submit your questions in the chat and submit them as we go. We'll try to answer them as we go. We'll pause every once in a while to make sure everyone's questions got answered. You can also ask to be unmuted, and Trinity can unmute you, and you can just ask your question or comment. And it's being recorded, and we'll share a link to the recording. But just to make sure everybody understands the chat and can use it, you have to the default setting is to send a message only to the host and panelists. So if you could switch that to everyone, and if folks don't mind putting their name, their city, and if you want to, your strongest interest in solar, whatever that is. Carbon footprint, saving money, energy resilience, technology, love the new technology. I'm going to pause just a second and let people do that. So the name, your city, and if you want to share your strongest interest in solar, all right, we got Emily and Kareem from Minneapolis. Awesome. Sorry, Carmen. Murphy from Blaine. Awesome. Getting Minneapolis again. Yeah. Nancy from Minneapolis. Awesome. Here we go. All right. All right. Yeah. Just return on investment. We're going to hit that hard. Yep. Yep. We're going to hit all these topics hard. All right. Built a house with car chargers and would love for them to be fueled by solar. Yeah. So that's all awesome. Yeah. Keep sharing that as we move forward. All right. I want to just acknowledge the partners that we have on this effort. They really do a lot of work in helping spread the word, and are essential to making our solar group buys work. So City of Minneapolis, an excellent sponsor. Partner, Minnesota Renewable Energy Society is a great partner, City of Coon Rapids and the City of Minnetonka. And we're working with MRES to promote solar at the state fair, and there's some volunteer opportunities there. If anyone's interested, follow up with an email to John or I. Will share our email before at the close of this webinar. All right, so Solar United Neighbors, a little bit about us. We're a vendor neutral national nonprofit. So we don't have a particular relationship with any installer. Our goal is to help you go solar. Do our group buy if that works for you, but we're a resource if you're going solar on your own and you want some feedback on a proposal you get, or whatever help you need in understanding the process of going solar. We're here for that. So how we think about ourselves, we help people go solar, join together, and fight for their energy rights. And by that, we mean we want to maintain policy that's making rooftop solar work for folks, that's making distributed solar work for folks, and we want to advance policy that makes even more possible. So we work around the country, and we've helped 9,200 families go solar through a group buy since our founding. That's 65 megawatts of solar and 843 tons of CO2 saved. Here in Minnesota, through group buys, we've helped 279 people go solar, and you can see the numbers there that flow from that. And there's Jessica Knight pictured there in the Powderhorn neighborhood. We helped her go solar 2 years ago. And hopefully many of you on this call tonight will be holding a sign like that sometime this year or early next year. A little bit about how we got started. And I like to share this story because it speaks to kind of how we operate and how we think about things. So in 2007, Anya Schoolman, she's the woman there in the sunglasses, her son Diego, which is to her left, our right in the picture, saw An Inconvenient Truth with Al Gore. Many of you might remember that, and came home and told his mom, Anya, we got to go solar. She felt like that made sense, and they started looking into it. But at that time, they got a lot of different answers from electricians, from installers, from the city about what was allowed, what was possible, what would work, what wouldn't work. And she's a community-minded person, really an organizer at heart. And so she got over 100 people in her neighborhood of Mount Pleasant to come together. And they met over a course of many months. It ended up being over a year to figure out what would work, how to work together to get the best price. And 50 homes ended up going solar in the neighborhood. And that story made the news, and she started getting calls from around the country. People wanted to do it in their community, in their neighborhood, and was operated out of her living room for a while. And now we've grown to have programs like the one here in Minnesota in 12 states, as well as Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. We've got members in all 50 states. Since 2007, we've done 425 solar co-ops or solar group buys, and 9,200 folks have gone solar through those group buys. In addition, we've helped a lot of folks figure out how to go solar on their own. But I say this because core to like how we think about ourselves and how we operate is we believe you can do more when you work together, and there's all kinds of bonuses when you bring a community together of like-minded people. Good things happen. So our theory of change is right here on this slide and in this picture. We want to help people go solar, and then we want to bring those folks together that want to figure out what policies worked and what made it more difficult than it needed to be to go solar, and then organize and pass laws that make more distributed solar possible, and then just keep running that cycle, keep growing, keep helping people go solar, keep creating policies that make more solar possible. Yeah, working for equity. Uh, we've been interested in this always, but after George Floyd's murder, I mean, many organizations, many people started thinking more intentionally about this, and that included Sun. And there's no doubt that our current energy system disproportionately harms low-income people and people of color, and they don't get the full benefits of as many benefits out of the system as others. So we want to make sure as we move towards renewable energy and towards solar that we don't repeat that problem, but we also want to address it if we can and help correct it. So in all of our solar group buys, there is a very clear path for low-income homeowners to go solar at very little or often no cost. And we'll review how that works a little bit later in the presentation. So here's what we'll cover today. Going to go through the basics of solar technology, tell you everything you need to know to have a good conversation with an installer and understand what you're getting into. We'll go through the economics of solar, what the costs are and how to think about the payback period. That will include the incentives available nationally and in Minnesota. And then the solar group buy we're running is called Solar Switch. We're calling it Solar Switch. We'll go through how that group buy process works. And again, ask questions as you go, either in the chat or you can ask to be unmuted, and Trinity can do that. Sorry, I'm pausing because there's a little bit of delay in advancing these slides. So solar technology, I'm going to turn it over to John Anderson, who's going to take us through the basics of solar technology. Take it away, John.
Hi, everyone. So my name is John Anderson, and I am the program associate for the state of Minnesota here at Solar United Neighbors. So I'm going to talk a little bit about solar technology. So just as a brief overview of sort of how solar panels work. Today we're going to be talking about solar photovoltaic, or sometimes called PV technology. So photovoltaic or PV technology converts the energy in sunlight into usable electricity. And not to get too wonky here, but this might remind you of your high school physics class. But basically, the light strikes those photovoltaic cells. This generates a stream of electrons that is the form of direct current or DC electricity. And that's the same type of electricity that comes out of a battery, like a car battery or a battery for a flashlight. It then goes into what's called an inverter, and that turns that DC or direct current into what's called alternating current or AC electricity. And that's the form of electricity that you use in your home to power your appliances and that sort of thing. And then that's also the form of electricity that can go back out onto the grid. Something to remember is that the majority of today's solar market and solar technology is this sort of photovoltaic technology. So there are other applications of solar technology, like thermal technology, that can be used for things like heating a pool, but that's just a small chunk of what's going on in sort of the world of solar. So I'm going to go through some sort of important terminology here. It's sort of important to understand how a solar system on your home would actually work. And it's sort of composed of four big components, if you look here on the photo or the picture. So the first is a solar array. That's the array of panels that would go on your roof or maybe the roof of your garage. And that's what's going to generate that direct current or DC electricity from sunlight. Then it goes into number two, if you see on there, and that's an inverter. And that changes DC electricity into that alternating current that can then be used to power the things in your home. The electrical panel is what diverts the electricity, that's number three, that AC electricity into your home, into your refrigerator, your TV, or whatever it is. And then any excess energy that's left over can be sent back out onto the grid where, say, your neighbor, someone directly in your community would then use it. In exchange for you putting that electricity back onto the grid, you get a credit from the power company. And then number four here, this is the utility meter. And this tracks how much electricity is flowing into your home, say at night when your solar panels are not generating electricity, or out onto the grid. Maybe like a day like today, very sunny, not hot at all. Maybe you don't have your AC on, you just have the windows open. So you'd be, during the day, you probably would have generated a lot of electricity that would go back on the grid. And I'm gonna just talk a little bit here about what a solar panel is made of. If I can get the next slide. There we go. So this is sort of, well, you can go back one. Yeah, so I'm just going to talk briefly about the system components in an actual panel. So if you look at that sort of diagram there, you can sort of see the solar cells, that's what generates the electricity. That sort of goes in the middle. Then the frame, the glass, and the encapsulant and the backplate. That is what sort of protects those solar cells and also isolates them. So it's sort of a sandwich with a bunch of different layers, if you will. And then the junction box there at the bottom, that's what transmits that electricity from the solar cells where it's generated to your inverter. Just to do a little terminology, a solar panel is composed of a bunch of different cells, typically about 60 to 72 per panel. And these panels are fairly large in size, about 6 feet by 3.5, or visually that's like the size of a normal sized American flag. So they're fairly big. And each panel has a large number of cells, of course. And then a solar array is sort of made up of all the different panels that would go into your system. So those are the two different terms: the cell, the panel, and the array, or the three different terms. These panels come with two different types of warranties. The first one is called a production warranty. And that covers the panel's ability to generate electricity. And these generally last for about 25 years. The way the technology works is over time, the panels will generate a little bit less and a little bit less, but most warranties will guarantee it to still be able to generate, between 80, 85, 87% of what it was able to generate, right out of the box, 25 years, sort of at the end of its life cycle. These have a long life cycle. And again, the warranty that applies to generation, that's called the production warranty. Then there's another warranty called the product warranty. So there's two warranties, and that covers any defects that might have happened in the manufacturing process. And then next slide.
Sorry, this is on me here. Let's see. There we go.
Yeah, here's a helpful visualization. This is sort of a normal sized person next to an array made up of a bunch of different panels there. And this would be for a 4.8 kilowatt solar array, which is a little small for an average house. But that sort of gives you a sense of how big it would have to be. And then I'm just going to talk briefly about another terminology. This might again remind you of maybe junior high or high school. But a watt is a unit of electric power. One way to think about it is like a 60-watt bulb. When you turn, and like a lamp, when you turn it on, it's using 60 watts of electricity once you turn that on. A kilowatt is a unit of power equal to 1,000 watts. 6,000 watts, 6 kilowatts, same amount. A kilowatt hour is a unit of energy that is equal to using that amount of power for over the course of an hour. And that's generally what your electric meter, if you go look at it, will usually say sort of how much you use is how many kilowatt hours. So to give just a random example, let's say you wanted to make your backyard really, really bright. So you plugged in, 60 or 160 watt bulbs, which would be a lot. But that would use, 100 times 60 or 6 kilowatts of power when you turned it on. And if you left it on for an hour, that would be 6 kilowatt hours. If you left it on for 2, it would be 12 kilowatt hours again. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about racking. Here's racking just refers to the type, the part of the system that's going to connect the panels physically, connect them to your house or garage or whatever they're mounted on. So this is a standard type of racking that would go into sort of a normal slanted roof. Next slide. And then here's a bunch of examples of some different kinds of that. And there's lots of different approaches, just depending on what kind of roof you have. So up there in the top left-hand corner, that's an example of what most of what will happen here in Minnesota. Most roofs are flat. And there are racking solutions for the vast majority of roof types. So whether that's asphalt shingles, clay or metal tiles, different types of metal roofs, or a rubber membrane roof. The one thing to be aware of is that slate is more difficult and costly to work on. I don't know if anyone here has a slate roof, but it might be more common in other parts of the country. But that is a special consideration if you have one. It's not impossible, but it might cost more because it's a little more difficult. And then again, here in Minnesota, where we usually have pitch roofs, the racking system like that one on the top left, that's pretty common. It's going to be using sort of flashing on there to make sure water isn't getting into your roof. And again, it holds the panel sort of above slightly the roof itself. Sort of in the top middle, there's another system. If you have a flat roof, you can use just a ballast system that just uses the weight of like a piece of concrete. But one thing to remember is that the roof has to be strong enough in order to take that extra load in order to use a ballast system. And then there's just some sort of other examples of different systems on here too. And then another system we'll be talking about a little bit is if you wanted to mount it directly on the ground. And then all photovoltaic systems have to be grounded to the earth for safety. And what that means is there has to be a wire that connects the array to the actual physical ground so that a charge can't build up because that can be dangerous. So the array can't just be not connected to anything. It has to be grounded. And then next slide. Oh no, this one's good. Just stay there. Yeah, so the one we just went past was just a standing seam, a metal roof that uses clamps. So if you have a metal roof that has seams in it, they attach it just differently using clamps. But that's just another example. And then here's an example of a ground-mounted system. A ground-mounted solar works great for orientation because you can point it directly at where the sun is going to be, and you'll have sort of it's the sort of the best orientation you can get. But it does cost more because, as you can see, you have those sort of metal poles, and there's like a concrete little foundation there. And they work best for people if you live in a rural area, or maybe if you sort of live out in the exurbs or whatever, and you have a really big yard. That is an alternative. But if obviously you would need a big yard in order to use that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about inverters. You can go to the next slide.
Yeah, sorry here. It's just going slow.
So again, inverters are the things I was talking about that transforms that direct current that comes directly from the solar panel into alternating current that you can use in your home and send back on the grid. So there's sort of three main types I'm going to just talk about here briefly. The first one's called string inverters. Those are generally used for larger arrays that don't have any shade. And the reason for that is they work best when all the panels are going to be producing the same amount of electricity at the same time. So let's say you live out, maybe in, I don't know, Maple Grove, in a pretty new subdivision, there's no big trees, you're pointed directly south on your roof. You'd probably end up with a string inverter there because all your panels are going to be, there's no shade, they're all pointed the same way, there's not going to be a lot of variance in how much electricity they're generating. Another system is called microinverters. That's on the right is an example there. And that just sort of converts that direct current into alternating current. Again, that's the usable kind in your home. It converts it at each panel itself. And so those are good if you have things like shading from trees in your neighborhood. Sometimes if you have a roof with multiple faces, these work good if you had some panels that will be generating 80% of what others would. And then there's what's called string inverters with DC optimizers that some installers used. And those are sort of a combination of both technologies. The big thing to remember here is your installer will know the best inverter for you after they look at your home. And once they do a proposal, they'll be able to explain to you, this is the size of the array, this is why we think you should use these inverters. But there are 3 different kinds, but it's not something that you personally have to become a giant expert on. And of course, me and Bobby are here to help and troubleshoot. But these are just sort of the 3 main kinds. And I'll just briefly just sort of go through some pictures of these here. Yeah, so the central string inverter, again, if I think that's one slide back, but basically all the sort of panels are hooked up in a string, and then it goes into the main inverter, and then that's what goes in your house. And again, that works great if there's little shading, and every sort of panel is going to be getting the same amount of sun. And then the other two examples, again, as you can see, the microinverters, there's a little inverter on each panel, and those are again better if there's lots of shading or something like that, where the panels will be generating different amounts of electricity. Yes, and then one thing that we do get questions about is, so what happens if the power goes out? And this is a little bit of a misconception, I think, that some people have. But the way that modern solar systems are set up on your home is that if the grid were to go down, say there was a big storm and there was a power outage, and once the sun came back out, once the grid goes down, your panels will automatically shut off and stop generating electricity. And the reason for that is, again, if you imagine a big storm afterwards, there's going to be tons of people out there trying to put the lines back up. And so it's just too dangerous to start putting electricity back into the system, one house at a time, because that could electrocute someone, or it could, cause a arc or something. So the systems are set up so that, again, if the grid goes down, your system will just stop generating electricity. The exception to that is if you're willing to invest in a battery system. And that's, more expensive. But if you're someone who, really wants that, that extra protection of being able to be on a battery in a power outage, it's something that you can look into and you can discuss with your installer. Again, it's going to cost more, but it is something that they can set up so that if the grid went off, you would still be able to, you would still have that battery power in your own house. And then next slide.
Sorry, it's just been a little finicky.
Now I'm just going to talk a little bit about electrical panels. An electrical panel, I think people are generally familiar with this in your house, but most modern electrical panels in homes built after the 1970s are pretty easy to set up for solar. There is an exception though. If all of your circuit breakers, all those little gray spots in this electrical panel were filled up with those black circuit breakers, then you would probably need a new panel. Likewise, if you live in an old house that has one of those old-fashioned screw-in fuse boxes, like my parents' old fuse box, then that would have to be, that's not compatible with a modern system. So that would have to be replaced. You'd have to get a new electrical panel installed, which would just be part of the proposal you'll get from an installer. And it's something that the incentives would apply to for you. And now here's a good question: is what is a good roof orientation for solar? So the most ideal direction for a solar roof is to face directly south. A roof facing south with no shade is going to receive the most of that given location's solar energy from the sun. And then directly east and directly west, excuse me, facing roofs are still workable, and they'll capture about 80% of the available solar resource, which kind of depends a little bit also on the roof's pitch. And speaking of which, if your roof is especially steep, if you have one of those, I don't know, like a kind of Gothic architecture or something maybe, and you have a very steep roof, that might be an extra cost as well. So those are just two things to keep in mind. Again, ideally, there would be little to no shading. And between the hours of 9 a.m. and 3 p.m., that's when the solar energy from the sun is at its highest. A bit like that's also the worst times to get sunburned. That's sort of the same principle. And then like I said earlier, if your roof is sort of different, if your roof is sort of more complex, like it has things like chimneys, vents, that sort of thing coming out of it, it might have to have a different shape in the solar array. Again, solar modules are fairly big, And even a large roof can lose a lot of that spacing. Again, if things like dormers or vents or a chimney is present. And then also the state fire code requires that a certain amount of the roof not have anything on it in case the firefighters need to cut into it. So that's a state law that's also on there. So just when you're thinking in your head, you know, how is my roof big enough? Obviously that's something we can certainly help you with, but just to keep in mind, even a large roof, the actual solar resource might be smaller than that if there are like things on the roof. And then just as a good sort of ballpark figure, you're gonna need about 200 square feet of unobstructed roof space to generate around 2 to 2.5 kilowatts, which is about as small as installers will make generally. So to make a 6 kilowatt array, which would be a decent sized array for, you know, a medium sized house, you would need about 600 square feet or 20 by 30 feet in order to do that. And again, finally, and this is a really important point to consider, if your roof has less than 10 years of life left, we would really recommend you to replace that roof before you go solar. Trying to replace a roof once it already has all that racking and panels on it is a real headache. So at a minimum, the roof should last as long as it takes for the system to pay for itself, which is something that if you choose to go solar, your proposal will have that amount of time it will take on it. But in Minnesota, that's generally between 10 and 15 years, average about 12. So, you know, if you live in a house that was built 4 years ago, you know, you're, you know, just good to go. But if you have a roof that's, you know, 10, 15 years old, you'd want to really look into possibly replacing it, and you know what the lifespan of it would be before you go ahead going solar. Because again, trying to change a roof with solar panels on it is a big headache. So yeah, that's a sort of overview of the technology. I'm going to throw it back to Bobby now to talk a little bit about net metering.
Thanks,
Unless,
John.
yeah, unless anyone
Yeah.
wanted to ask me an in-person question, but or we can just get back to that later. It works.
Yeah, and there's some questions in the chat I've jotted down, and I'll speak to them as I go.
Okay, great.
Yeah, sorry about this, folks. This slide deck is advancing finicky. Okay, here we go. So net metering. Sorry. Let me get back to this. Hopefully it'll stay there now. So net metering is the process by which you're compensated, credited for the solar electricity that you produce on your home, on your roof, that you send back through the meter and your neighbor uses. So today, if you had a nice sized array and your windows were open, you'd be producing a lot of power that you don't need. So electricity's hungry to be used up. You got a light on, refrigerator running, you're going to use what you need. But what you don't use is going to go back on the grid and your neighbor's going to use it. It's going to go to the closest draw. So your neighbor's going to use the power you produced. Xcel Energy is going to charge them for using that power, so you get credited for it at retail. And that whole system is called net metering, and it's an essential policy to making solar work here in Minnesota. We were the first state to adopt it in 1989. All right. So what does your electric bill look like? You'll be charged for the electricity that you use from the grid, and the electricity that you exported will be deducted from your bill. And there'll be an amount left for you to pay, or there may be a credit. So different utilities give you different options for how you want to settle up. Often what people do is they settle up at the end of the year. So if at the end of the year you've generated more than you used and you have a credit, your utility will mail you a check. All right, I'm advancing the slide and it's going slow. Yeah, so here's a little bit about batteries, and John covered some of this. So when the power goes out, your array shuts down to protect the lines, people that are out there trying to get things going again. There is a workaround for that if you want it. Most inverters now will allow you to create a system where you can island your power, and so it will stay in your home. It's kind of expensive to do. I actually don't know of anyone who's done it because when you start looking at the cost, it seems like it's not worth it, but it is possible. But if you want to have consistent power when the power goes out, you need batteries. Uh, and so some of the things that the reasons people opt to go with batteries is if you have frequent utility outages. We work in Texas, and in Texas, the grid is famously unreliable as they pursued the totally unregulated free market route. Um, Maybe you have critical loads at home. You got a Wi-Fi router and you work at home and it has to be working. You got medical equipment, or emergency or disaster preparedness is something that's important to you. Um, Sorry, when I just stopped speaking, I'm waiting for the slide to advance. For some reason, there's a delay here. And so the other thing to understand about batteries is they won't power your whole home. They're not that big yet. They're not that efficient yet. So what will happen is your installer will create a circuit that the battery will power that power some essential loads that you want to keep going. Usually people choose a refrigerator, maybe your Wi-Fi router, an outlet that runs your cable modem or some lights. People usually would opt not to power an electric stove, electric dryer, electric water heater. Anything that produces heat uses a lot of electricity. So you'll decide what you want that battery to power uh, and create a circuit for that. And here's an example of someone putting up an 8.15 kilowatt solar array for around 25K, and the batteries for 13.5 kilowatt hours of storage add another 12K. Battery prices uh, are trending down. The problem now is that a lot of the raw material for batteries is being used by the car manufacturers now. But so right now they add a lot of cost. But we have solarunitedneighbors.org/storage, a pretty comprehensive battery guide. We have some folks on staff that love batteries and are battery nerds. If you have some in-depth questions that you want help with. And someone asked about, can you add batteries later? You can add batteries later. You want to talk to your installer about that. There's kind of a VHS Betamax war going on with the batteries to decide which system is going to win, what format. So you have to decide kind of what you want to prepare for, but you can let your installer know that, and they can see if there's a way to accommodate you so that your system is more battery ready. Yeah, again, there's the storage guide. We're gonna do a quick review before we move on to the next section. So again, you got your solar array on your roof. You got your solar inverter, takes the DC power from the panels, turns it into AC. That all flows to your electrical panel. You use what you need. The rest goes through a utility meter, back onto the grid, and your neighbor uses that locally produced renewable power. They get charged for it by Xcel, and you get a credit for it. Let's see. Yeah. So pause here to make sure we've got all the questions answered and speak to some common questions we usually get. So again, the warranties, you got your production warranty that will guarantee you a certain percentage of effectiveness on the 25th year, runs between 85 and mid 90s. So if it was 90%, that would mean on the 25th year, the panel is going to be producing 90% of the power it did on year one. So it's a product that manufacturers feel good about. Then there's the product warranty that goes from 12 all the way up to 25 years, depending on the panel. Homeowners insurance, this varies tremendously. You're going to want to check with your insurance company to see if your rates will be increased and by how much. A lot of companies, since you're adding value to your home and there's something additional there to insure, will increase your policy by a minimal amount. If you find they want to increase it dramatically, it's really worth shopping around. There's not much consistency there. Maintenance, there's no moving parts, so there's no ongoing maintenance, but things can go wrong. And two things about this. The inverter will send out a signal to an app on your phone or your computer that will give you the status of your system, how much you're producing, how much you've produced over the life of your system, which months are your best producing months, and what panels are working and how well they're working. Your installer will also be monitoring that app and be notified if there's a problem. But you can see too if something doesn't seem to be working right, and if you need to call your installer about replacing something. And ideally, it would be covered by the warranty. So someone asked about squirrels and the inverters and the wiring. Some people choose to get critter guards, which is just some kind of like little fencing or a little ring of wire that goes around the base of the panel against the roof that keeps critters from getting under there and chewing wires. I really have never figured out why some people have problems with critters and some people don't. Most people don't get it, and most people don't have problems. But, we just had a fellow who, a squirrel put a nest under his array and they started chewing up some wires and it was a headache to get things replaced. So you'll want to talk to your installer about that and we can talk to you too about your specific situation. So how long do systems last? We expect these panels to be producing well beyond the 25th year. But this new generation of panels, we're seeing how good they are right now. Homeowners associations, Sun, working with our allies, passed a law that for single family homes and HOAs, in most cases, they have to allow you to go solar. If you're having trouble with your HOA, we'll work with you. Historic districts, a little bit trickier. Usually if the panels are visible from the street, you'll get some pushback. We can try to help you navigate that, but that's hit and miss. Then someone asked about Connexus, which charges a $25 grid access fee, they call it. And it doesn't matter if you have a battery or don't have a battery, you're just getting charged that $25 grid access fee. So the thing to do about that is call Connexus and tell them you don't appreciate that and ask them to reconsider that or lower it. But right now, that's just the way it is. Did I miss any questions or anybody got something they want to ask right now before we move on? Oh, someone had a question about a flat roof that was slightly pitched north. I think it's possible that could work. They might have to tilt the panels. I join the group buy and have an installer tell you what they think. If it's not making sense to you, you contact me or John or Trinity and we'll help you figure it out. But I think it's possible it could work. Someone asked about ice dam issues. I haven't had any problems with folks that we've helped go solar on ice dam issues. The problem that we do get, and I should have spoken to this earlier, is snow. So when snow covers your panels, they're not producing power. And and you'll lose production. We get so little sunlight in Minnesota in the winters, everyone knows that the difference between people that clean their panels and people that don't in terms of production is really small. So there's people that do it. They want to eke out every kilowatt hour they can. But if you choose not to, you're not really losing much production. But what happens to some people, especially if you're close to your neighbor's house, that snow slides off all at once and it can it can slide over onto your neighbor's property or drop down onto your own walkway and someone could be under there. There are some solutions that either divert the snow or break up the snow that your different installers offer different options. So there are some options there. A roof rake. What you want to use to clean a panel, they make some special products for it, but you don't want anything that's going to scratch or damage that glass. So I wouldn't use a roof rake unless I put like a soft cloth or towel around it that I knew wasn't going to come off. All right, solar economics. So the first thing to understand about this technology is the price for the equipment has dropped dramatically as the quality of the equipment has gotten better. And that just has to do with all the mass production of these panels. It's a competitive industry with, you know, companies producing panels around the world. And it's getting better and cheaper every year, give or take. There's been some problems in the supply chain that have created some problems, but the trend is more affordable and better product. The first incentive that a lot of people have probably heard about is the 30% federal tax credit, which is in place until 2032, thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, which renewed this incentive. So what that means is 30% of the cost of your solar, and that will include if you need a panel upgrade or any wiring upgrades associated with that solar. 30% of that you can claim is a credit against your income tax owed. So if your credit is larger than the income tax that you owe, you can roll over the remaining amount into future years. The important thing to just understand, though, is if you have a very small tax burden and that 30% isn't something you can achieve in the short term, this incentive has limited value to you. But if it's going to be something you can recover in a year or two, it really drives down your rate of return and your payback period. All right. Yep, here's just an example of pricing taking into consideration the solar federal income tax credit. So we'll look at the 8 kilowatt system. The price here is 25,600 at 320 a watt, which is the average price in Minnesota. Then the tax credit, this is assuming that person can use it in 1 year. The net cost becomes 17,920. Then, of course, the minute that solar is up there, it's producing electricity that has a monetary value. With this system, they're going to produce $1,293 worth of electricity in the first year. The estimated 10-year savings, which is more than just the number above it times 10 because the price of electricity is going up, not down. So taking into consideration that your net profit over 25 years is 20,893. When I look at proposals in Minnesota, the payback period falls between the 8 and 12 year range, usually closer to 12. And some installers will clearly put the payback period on their proposal. If the installer you have doesn't, you can ask them for it and they can tell you what it is. And we're happy to look at it with you and make sure that it's accurate. But part of the vetting process for the solar installers that will be able to bid on the group buys business is we have rules about how they calculate the rate of return. We want them to have a realistic cost escalator and and a realistic estimate of what the panels will produce. All right, this is just taking a look at if you borrow instead of pay cash. So on that 8 kilowatt in this example, for a 15-year loan, you know, your loan payment's $133 a month. You're going to save $108 a month in this case. Your net monthly payments, your net payment for a month then is $25, and your net profit over 25 years is going to be 15,000. I think the main takeaway from this is you can borrow money and solar can still make sense, but of course your payback period is going to be lower as the interest is eating up some of the is going to cost money. So loans, people may have read that the Attorney General has gone after some lending companies that were offering questionable products, that were hiding fees. You want to look carefully at lending. I would always recommend seeing what your solar installer offers, take a look at it, but you likely can save by shopping around. All the financing options that we know of that we think are good options are on our website, solarunitedneighbors.org/financing. There's some national options on that page, and scroll down to the bottom and you'll see a link to look at some Minnesota specific options. And we have a nonprofit in Minnesota called, oh, this is just our website, sorry. Our solarunitedneighbors.org/financing will get you what we know about. That's what that page looks like. We do have a nonprofit in Minnesota called the Minnesota Center for Energy and Environment. They do solar loans, good rates, low fee or no fee in many cases. They have a program in partnership with some cities that will get you an even better rate. You can see a list of the cities there. I always recommend going to them first, seeing what they can do for you, and then see if you can beat it. Current rates start at 6%. And we think that's high now, but 6% is actually a pretty good rate historically. All right, Twin Cities area solar incentives. Let's go through those. So the first incentive that everyone who's an Xcel customer can get is Xcel Solar Rewards. So it pays 3 cents a kilowatt hour for 10 years. There's 2024 funds are at 11.5 million. There's plenty of money left in that pot. So if any solar installer starts talking to you about make a decision quick, money's running out, it's not true. Run from that person, from that company. To get that solar incentive, though, you have to limit the size of your array to 120% of your usage. Yeah, it says production here. That's wrong. 120% of your usage. It can't be any larger than that. So if you have a really great roof and you can produce 200% of your usage from your array on your roof, it might be worth foregoing that incentive and getting the net metering on that additional size. Getting the net metering might more than make up for that incentive that you lose. You can get net metering up to 40 kilowatts, which is a massive system for a home. Someone just asked about a community solar garden setup. So you can have both solar on your roof and community solar, but the combination of the two can't be greater than the 120%. If you also have community solar. So you're gonna want to get your proposal from your installer. Maybe the largest system you can get on your home covers 65% of your usage. So your community solar will work out fine. But yeah, you can do both, and they both often make sense together. But there'll be some situations where you'll have to forego your community solar if you want to do rooftop. All right, so here's a look at what that solar, sorry. Yeah, here's a look at what that solar rewards incentive might be on a 5 kilowatt system. You'll see that XL Solar Rewards estimated year one production earnings would be $279 a year on a 5 kilowatt system. So you can kind of extrapolate from that and guess, what a 10, 15, 8 kilowatt system would be. So it's it's money you don't want to forego if it works out for you. But again, some people, if they want to produce 150, 200% of their electricity, 300%, whatever the percentage is, because their roof allows for it, they forego that incentive and just produce more solar, which is great. Okay, XL income qualified solar rewards. So this applies to folks that are enrolled in any of these low income programs. So if you're on energy assistance, if you're a Habitat for Humanity homeowner or a community land trust homeowner, WIC or SNAP recipient, medical assistance, or you have a Section 8 housing voucher, you can get an upfront incentive of $275 a watt, which is most of the cost of solar. We've worked it out with the solar installers that are going to participate in this group buy that you don't pay that out of pocket ever. It's just deducted from your bill. And that incentive will be assigned to the installer. The other incentive that the group buy can get you for folks that live in Minneapolis is the Minneapolis Green Cost Share payment. So it pays you a certain amount based on your estimated first year of production. So for folks that don't fall into the green zone or the income qualified, it'll pay you 20 cents a kilowatt hour for your estimated first year of production. 35 cents if you live in a green zone. I'll explain that in a second. And if you qualify for the income qualified solar rewards, it pays 40 cents a kilowatt hour for your first year of production. So these are the green zones in Minneapolis, and they have a tool you can go on their website and put in your address and see if you're in a green zone. But green zones are areas of the city that the city's determined are disproportionately have communities of color in them, BIPOC communities, and they're have been disproportionately harmed by the impacts of pollution. So there's programs in the city that are set up to provide some benefits to folks living in the green zone. This solar green zone cost share program is one of them. So here's an example of what that payment would be on a 5 kilowatt system for someone that didn't live in a green zone and didn't isn't income qualified. That 5 kilowatt system, you get a check for $1,250. The way that works in this situation is that after your solar's installed and you've paid the installer, so you'll be paying them that $1,250. And there's certain documents Sun needs to collect to get reimbursed from the city. We will send you a check, Sun will, and then we get reimbursed from the city. And we have a limited amount of money for this. Right now we've got $50,000. We might get some more. We also have to keep a ratio of 1 low-income homeowner to 4 market rate homeowners. We'll be tracking all that. I don't have any concerns about us being able to keep the ratio. Your installer will know if there's funds available in that pool, and it'll show up on your offer. So here's how it would work for a low-income qualified customer. Again, that's one of the customers that is in Excel territory and is in one of those income qualified programs, which would also qualify for you this incentive. So a 5 kilowatt system at 314 a watt, be 15,700. A 5 kilowatt system will produce about 6,250 kilowatt hours of electricity a year. So the solar rewards is that 5 kilowatt times 2.75, which is 13,750. And then the green cost share is that 6,250 times 40 cents. So you can see that in Minneapolis, your solar would be fully paid for. Again, we've worked it out with the installer. The green cost share incentive will go to the installer, so you'd have no out-of-pocket costs. Outside of Minneapolis, if you didn't get the green cost, where you can't get the green cost share, you'd be out about $2,000. So these incentives, working through the group buy, can make solar very possible for a low-income homeowner. Yeah, Trevor's asking about when he's going to get his offer. I'm going to cover that. Absolutely. September 12th. I've got some more details on that, but the short answer is September 12th. Any questions on the incentives before I move on? If some come up, put them in there in the chat. So what is Solar Switch? It's a group buying program for solar PV and battery storage for homeowners and small business owners in the larger Twin City metro area. It's going to save you time and money. We vet the installers. We'll only use local installers, Minnesota-based installers that we know have a proven track record of delivering a quality product and quality service after. That's the only folks allowed to bid on this business. And we're working in partnership with a company called iChooser on this. And the partners I listed earlier, the city, Minneapolis, and MRES, Coon Rapids, Minnetonka. So why do people like the Solar Switch? So it's a voluntary buying group, it's free to join, free to get an offer. There's no obligation to take the offer. Using the group buying power, we're going to get a very good price. Me and John and Trinity are here to help you throughout the process if you want it. Solar Switch, this company iChooser that does the Solar Switch with us, they also have staff that can help. And then a lot of people like to plug in the sun and stay connected and work on solar advocacy. So benefits of the group mine. We see a savings of 15 to 25% in the price we can get. It's a hassle-free process. You'll get an offer with very little work on your end from a very reputable installer at a very good price. We do research into all the products they offer and have a standard they have to meet to enter into the auction. And we're here to help you throughout the whole process. And again, we want to help you go solar. If you end up not going solar through the group buy, that's fine with us. We're happy to look at other bids you get to and help you compare if you want to seek out some other bids and see how they stack up against the one you get through Solar Switch. So just part of the theory behind the group buy, is that you can see this is a chart of the price of solar, how it's gone down since 2010. You can see that the system components has gone down. Labor costs have gone down as it just people get better and it gets easier to install. But procuring customers is unbelievably expensive for solar companies and it hasn't gone down. So what we're offering these solar companies is a large group of folks who've been educated about solar and have indicated they're very serious about it. So high quality customers is very valuable to any solar installer. And that's what we're doing by coming together. So here's the solar switch process for participants. Go online and register. And if you haven't already, I'll share the website in a little bit. We will be doing an auction. And the embedded installers that have the best price will win. On September, we're going to have all that done by September 12th. On September 12th, you'll get what we're calling the personal recommendation. So that's going to come via Solar Switch. It'll show you the name of the installer, and based on the information you gave us about your home, what your personal recommendation is, the size of the array, and the cost. You will decide if you want to move forward. That's one decision point. If you want to move forward with that personal recommendation, you pay a refundable $150 deposit. You get that back whether you go solar or you don't go solar. But the idea is we want folks to indicate, give us some strong signal that they're very serious. Once you pay that $150 deposit, you'll be put in touch with the winning installer who will review your situation and may make some changes to that personal recommendation based on some more detail about your home and what you want to do. But the personal recommendation you see is going to be very, very close to right. You'll look at what the installer offers you and you'll decide to do it or you'll decide not to do it. There's no obligation to do it. There's no cost if you don't do it. You get that $150 deposit back, whether you go solar or not. And then you move on to the installation stage if you sign the contract. So here's the website, solarswitch.com, Twin Cities. It's going to ask you some basic questions about your home, what you're looking for. The more accurate you can be, the better, but don't let knowing every little detail block you from getting it done and getting registered. It's set up to help you figure out the answer to the questions that are essential. Then on September 12th, you'll get an email from Solar Switch through the platform that will have your personal recommendation. The size of the array that's recommended for you, the equipment that would be used, and the cost, and the installer that's won the auction and is offering that. You pay your $150 deposit, and you're connected with the installer, and you move forward working with them. If you're low income, if you've indicated you qualify for any of those low income incentives, then the $150 deposit is waived. Oh, sorry, someone, Trinity's telling me that the all offers out date, is August 12th. We got a slide with the info in it. This is what the decision deposit page looks like. Sorry. Yeah, you'll decide if you want to pay the deposit, being put in touch with the installer. The $150 deposit, you get it back again, no matter what. And here are the key dates. So, yeah, we're in the process of doing the reverse auction and selecting the installers. And then September 11th, all the personal recommendations will go out. Then your deadline to decide whether or not you want to do it is November 22nd. And then we've worked out with the installers that May of next year is the deadline for installing them. Most people will be installed way before that, but if we run into bad weather, sometimes things, as we get into early winter, sometimes things can be kicked over to next spring. Someone else thinks that I've got the date wrong on here. Trinity, are you able to look and see? I thought I pulled that from our. Well, put it in the chat, Trinity, if you think that. Is the personal offer going to go out before September 11th? Oh, I see. Yeah, the personal offer, sorry, will go out August 21st. Sorry about that. We think about 1,000 folks will sign up. And about 10% of them go solar. We've got 340 folks signed up right now. So again, sorry, I have the date wrong. You'll get your personal offer on August 21st. I pulled the wrong date. So again, this is the website if you haven't already signed up. If you have, share it with your friends that are interested in solar. And trying again. What happens to the panels at the end of their life? That's a great question. So they're not at the end of their life yet, so we don't know. But the industry is very serious about recycling. That's one potential use. They're pretty uniform products. So there's already companies dedicated to recycling them. There's a large one in Wisconsin. So the idea is that there would be a track for recycling. I expect that in the United States, when a panel gets down to 75%, 60% of its production, people might want to upgrade or get a new panel. I think there'll be a market in other countries for panels that are used but not brand new. So that's something that is important and is getting consideration right now. Thought there was one more slide here, but I can't get it to do anything. There we go. So you can get in touch with me or John or Trinity at Minnesota team at solarunitedneighbors.org. And we'll get back to you quickly if you have questions. Question about resources for HOAs considering going solar as a group. I'm happy, Jane, to talk to you about that more, tomorrow or in the future if you want. I don't think a HOA would ever get a better price than you'll get through this group buy based on my experience, but there might be some additional benefits that we could figure out. I'd be happy to brainstorm that with you. Any other questions?
We did have another question about how many homes have gone, or how many homes we hope to go solar.
Yeah, no, I think we'll have 1,000 signups. That's what we're on track to get. And usually about 10% of the people that sign up go solar. So we'd be looking at 1,000 signups and ultimately 100 folks go solar this round. And then with Solar Switch, the way we're doing the group by now, as soon as this one's over, we're going to start another one. So there'll always be one going on. We'll be doing 2 a year in the Twin Cities area. Folks, thanks for your time and your interest in solar, and reach out to us if you have questions and we'll get back to you quickly. Appreciate everyone's time.
Thanks so much.